Hi, welcome to Ricardo's Crossing. Now this is a video response to Swords So Negative hashtag. So what I want to do, it really made me think about my decks. Now I actually don't have a physical deck of Rider-Waite-Smith. There was a whole lot of decks that disappeared in a shift in storage and who knows where or what, or I do have some ideas, but I'm just not going to go there. Anyway, so what I've been doing is replacing some of my decks, and I actually haven't been drawn to replacing with Rider-Waite-Smith imagery. Even though I have got a couple on my wish list, I actually haven't brought them. I've actually preferred other decks, and I have got some other decks coming, which I'm waiting for. But here's a few of the physical decks that I've looked at. And some are based on Rider-Waite-Smith to some extent. So let's go through. I don't know quite where to start. Okay, I might start with Radley Valentine. I'm going to with the Angel Tarot with Radley Valentine. Okay, and the artist, Steve Roberts. So I want to honour the artist and Radley Valentine in regards to this deck. Now you look at now we know with being an Angel Tarot, the imagery is very positive energy. The imagery is quite positive because you can see the ace of, oh shoot, sorry, I would have just, that's right, I've moved this camera. So here's the ace of air. So you can see that's very, there's two of air. Now the three of air, which is quite cute. There's a couple of white unicorns with a baby. Horses, unicorns. So you can sort of see very, very positive sort of imagery. You can see that they're all unicorns, so they've got that same sort of mystical air energy. So every card, I just want to show this as an alternative to an artist who has created completely imagery that's very not traditional in any sense. Even though the words may be slightly, the words at the bottom, like the Eight of Air, talks about being trapped, but it also talks about a lack of self-confidence. So I think there's a lot of symbolic imagery that can be taken from these cards. You've got Nine of Air. So just this, I mean, this really, I think, is the most positive sort of deck overall that doesn't really balance out too much in the imagery sense. But I find when I read it, it really gets to the shadow work. I think it's just the type of reader I am. I mean, everybody's so different. But for me, when I read with this deck, I do find I have a real sitting in silence, being with the moment in your perspective. I sort of get that from these cards. You know, about sometimes you've got to say things that people might not agree with. It's just the way it is. So I think this deck is, and the imagery is very positive. I think that's what I get from this deck here. So that's Angel Tarot by Radley Valentine. So you can sort of see, and I understand, I just can't work with the Rider-Waite-Smith in general readings for myself. I just don't feel, or even for my clients. I mean, I have got it, and I can, not physically now, of course, but on the computer, and I can use it for readings and such, but I just don't enjoy the connection. And it wasn't the first deck that I actually connected with. The first deck I actually connected with was the Native American Tarot by Magdalene Gonzalez. And I actually found this deck to be one that actually spoke volumes to me overall. Unfortunately, it disappeared, so I have just received a replacement. It's very different with the US games. It's now they've got this sort of plastic feel to it, so it doesn't feel like the original, of course, but you can, their swords is actually blades. So it's quite different than Rider-Waite-Smith. There is sort of a bit of a toss connection to it. I know there's so many ways to think. It's got its own stories as well, its own legends, its own teachings. So I think that's really important when you're working with a deck like this, that you actually connect with the author. Even the little white book I found quite good. I'm waiting to get the full book again, which I've ordered, which I'm waiting for. So this is the 5, which talks about scouting ahead, which I think, or the scout, which talks to me about scouting ahead to find solutions to the problems, to the issues, which I thought was quite cool. The 4 of Blades. This is the 5 of Blades, which talks about spiritualist. So it's about connecting with those that have passed, maybe with your higher self. It's very much about that conflict we may have within our own spirituality. So I quite like this card. 6 is quite traditional in that shifting, that moving ahead, that travel. 7, they do horse thief, so something being stolen, so that's, yeah, very. 8, they talk about being captive. But it doesn't really show it, which is quite good. You can, like I find when I'm doing the reading, you can really, polygamy for number 9. Now, I know the 10, it's not a lot of blood, and it's just 3 arrows actually in his back. And he's lying there. So you actually don't know whether he's actually dead or not. He's just been badly wounded. And whether that's a self-wound. You know, I mean, you can sort of read a lot into it. This is the Maiden, which is like your page, basically. He's your warrior, which is like your knight. So you can see him rushing ahead. And he's ready for battle, and you can see that he's on the side, and that's a very traditional way of riding into battle, you know, being hidden, not so that you can be a little bit more obscure. Matriarch, and she looks very firm and to the truth of the whole situation. And the chief. So yeah, there might be a darkness to this, but I think that I find when I'm reading, I'm looking at, okay, how can I change that to the positive aspects. Now, another deck that I actually enjoy working with is the Epic Tarot with their swords, and this I find quite different. So here's your ace. 2 of Swords I actually find really interesting in the way she's removed her mask to find some inner peace. Now, 3 of Swords, very different about being a sense of being attacked, about being hurt, being wounded, but it's no blood. So this is a 3 of Swords, and this is from the Epic Tarot. 4 of Swords, the whole resting. I thought 5 of Swords were quite interesting because there's no battle or anything. It's just you're in a battle, standing on the edge of the cliff, and do you fly off? I think I already got this before. Now the 6 of Swords is quite different, with throwing the sword over the edge, throwing away the old thoughts. Seven of Swords, I think, is very different, with this whole maybe a sense of needing to help yourself. 8. 9. It's quite cool. Now have a look at the 10 of Swords. I think that's what fascinated me in regards to not one person, but there's actually 2 people on it. It's a guy and a girl, and are they arguing? Are they fighting? Is it the end of a relationship? You've got the animals in there as well, the unicorn, the dragon, the griffin, and the phoenix. So isn't that interesting for a... Sorry, my arm is doing that. My right side is not very good. So isn't that interesting for a 10 of Swords as an ending? Maybe beginning something new. There's a sense of completion and, you know, and new opportunities given. Now, isn't that an interesting 10 of Swords? I love this deck to work with because, yeah, I think the imagery is not so gory, so, you know, with so much blood and stuff. You've just got the unicorns for the page, the griffin for the knight, the phoenix for the queen, and the dragon for the king, just to show you really quickly. But I think the Epic Tarot, that's the backs to them. I think the Epic Tarot is a great deck if you don't want to, I think it does a lot more self-exploration. If you don't want to see those negative aspects and, you know, those negative imagery, you can still see the aspects but not the negative imagery. I think that's a really great deck. Let's have a look at the Fairy Lights Tarot. You can tell me what you think of this as a deck. 1, 2. Now this is another one. Doesn't have any, there's 3 of Swords. 4. 5. So this lends itself a bit different as well. I find the imagery is 6. And she's put the boat in 7. Which I thought was quite interesting. So this is about taking back your, taking back what belongs to you by moving ahead. 8. I thought was very interesting. 9. Okay, now this one's interesting because 10, you actually have the guy still standing. Isn't that interesting? So it's about the communication, that healing, moving through. Everything feels complete, but you're ready to move ahead. This has a very knight feel about it as well, which is quite interesting. But anyway, 10 of Swords. So have a look at that and see what you think about that one. Now this is called the Fairy Lights Tarot. Fairy Lights Tarot. So some artists, I feel, have really explored, what's this, the knave, the page, have really explored other avenues so that the pictures don't have, the imagery doesn't have to be as gory. I've looked at it from a very mental perspective, not a physical, because I sometimes think Rider-Waite Smith and some of those traditional cards really have explored the swords in a very physical aspect instead of a mental aspect. And I think some of these other decks, like the Epic Tarot and the Fairy Lights, which I really love, 2 decks, which I feel have really explored it in a completely different way. Now, Circle of Life Tarot, another round one. And I love the imagery in this one as well. I mean, very different in regards to the ace. I love that. 2, She's merged with the elephant. It's quite cool. Now I think this 3 is quite interesting as well because you can't really tell. Let me have a look. Even though there seems to be a battle going on some sort, like really is a battle, it doesn't really, there's no blood or anything like that. So it's sort of, I think it opens up to a bit more of an interpretation with perceptions. 4, the 5. So I think some artists, 6 is quite different. Walking instead of, this actually reminds me of the Crystal Visions tarot deck, another deck that I sort of looked at but didn't really purchase. But I think some artists really have lent themselves to look outside of the traditional Rider-Waite, and I love that aspect of it. I mean, Circle of Life has some aspects that are sort of battley or challenges, but they don't have the gore, but still hold a lot of mental perception. Okay. Now the 10 is one of falling. You know, that's the way things are ending, is that you actually fell, you actually fall. But again, there's no blood or anything on the card, which I think is really cool. So I actually really like this imagery for the fact of things ending, ready to begin something new. You really don't see, I mean, there does seem to be a few swords at the bottom with a little bit of blood, but it doesn't really, they're not really super bright. So when you pull them out, people don't initially see that, which I think is quite cool. So here we have the page, which is a bit older. It's quite interesting. Or he's just younger with a lot of beard. I'm still deciding whether he's an older or a younger gentleman, which I think is quite interesting. There's the knight, the queen, and the king. So you can really see some of the differences. Now, what is something a little different? So I picked up Claude Boudreaux's the Scarabeo deck with the Tarot de Marseille, and I do like this system or this lineage, the way the cards move with opening up to other aspects. And I love working with the numerology and the suit aspect as well. So I thought that was sort of quite cool. I mean, everyone's seen sort of a Tarot de Marseille type deck, so we all know that they've got the curves and the flowers and the buds and the, you know, there's so much more to them than just being the swords and the numerology when you start looking at the way the flowers grow and the way this one's contained within. You know, 4s always remind me of being boxed in, being contained. 5 is a sense of breaking through. 6, sense of harmony. Or feeling safe. 6 always reminds me of being safe, feeling like everything is feeling safe. 7 seems about just everything seems to be going in the right direction, just the luck, fortune. It's about things that are happening, bad luck, good luck. What is? It's about accepting what is. 8 to me is always about complete. You know, there is in the Tarot de Marseille a sense of 8 being a sense of completed. Things are completed. 9's being initiation, so like you're moving into a new sense of a new level. And then 10 being new opportunities. I love that. And then you've got your page. So cute. The knight. The queen. And the king. Oh, queen, sorry. And then the king. Around the wrong way. Okay, so that's the Tarot Namaste. Now I actually picked up, I wanted an animal tarot deck. And when I picked up the Tarot Familiar, I always want to say Tarot Familiar. I don't know why, but anyway, Tarot Familiar. I was a little disappointed at first with not having the animals on all the cards. They're just on the Major Arcana and the Court cards and the aces. But the more I worked with it, the more I realised how much more freedom I'm given with not having all the animals on all the cards. So I actually really love, this is the ace, which is all about the raven. Okay, so I absolutely love, all the crow, sorry, I absolutely love this deck in the respect of the animals and the way that the each of the suit card, each of the minor arcana are actually portrayed. I think Lisa Parker's done a brilliant job with this actually. I think this is just really superb. You know, you've got this sense of stability, foundations being built, a sense of even, like for me, for being the 4 directions, to know which direction are you actually going mentally. These other aspects come through. I find this really sort of opens you up to a cosmic, if you like, possibilities, pulling in all the knowledge that I've gained over the last 20 years with working with tarot. You know, I really feel like I have really gained a wealth of base knowledge. There's still so much I'm learning as I go through. I mean, there's so much more to gain when you start adding other aspects to the cards. I mean, I have explored a little bit of the initiatory tarot of the Golden Dawn, not physically on the computer, and looking at some of the, the other aspects, the deacon, the astrology, the Kabbalah, and all that coming into the decks. I mean, it really can open you up to a lot more interpretation than the traditional Rider-Waite imagery leads you to. I think sometimes people they can do when they're learning tarot is look at the imagery of the deck and really take that image as literal. Like the hangman is actually someone hanging themselves, or the death card is actually being a death of some sort. A sword card is someone actually physically killing you or stabbing you in the back. And there's so much more that the cards can lend to when you're open to something like this can really allow you to expand. I mean, I love these. It's like the page or the knave of swords. 3-door-way to key. It's got the steps, the movement, it's the knight. The queen has the lunar energy. And the king has the cross. The self-belief, self-knowledge. I mean, I think Lisa Parker did a brilliant job with the Tarot Familiar. So that could be another deck that I think if you wanted to work with something a little different. I mean, I think imagery-wise, this just opens you up. Okay, another deck I was actually given by my daughter's boyfriend was just a tarot deck. It's just called tarot. There's nothing to it. I think it's just a kit. that someone had. Oh, okay, 1 minute. Okay, I'm back. That was just in regards to my son having surgery, so that was part of that. So anyway, let's continue with what's going on. And now I was talking about the tarot deck given to me by my daughter's boyfriend. He was doing some stuff and got given the opportunity to grab some stuff out of a box, and this was in it and thought about me, so I thought that was really cool. It's got a book as well. So anyway, this card in regards to the swords, again, you've got this sort of Tarot de Marseille type of deck. In a way, some of the cards do give us sort of a sense of Rider-Waite-Smith as well in it, but yet, because I think of the purple being for the swords, it gives it a real spiritual, mental aspect of it that's still very, actually I find these swords, actually it must be the wands that have a very Rider-Waite-Smith aspect to it. The swords are more Tarot de Marseille. It's a very mixed sort of deck and quite different. So that's the 5. So the 6. So very different, I think. So it's sort of a Tarot de Marseille mixed with a Rider-Waite, sort of imagery, sort of flexibility, or thoth. I think it's got a little bit of everything in it. It's not sort of really set in anything. So I think that's really cool. So there's your 10, which I thought was quite neat. So you got your page, the knight, so I think the colours sort of lend itself to a new sort of different sort of meaning, a bit lighter, I find. Okay, another deck which I love was a gift from Serafina, which I'm absolutely loving working with. Now this imagery has everyday images, and there is a tendency to Rider-Waite-Smith, and I love that the sword's actually this way, and I keep wanting to turn it around, but it's actually this way, so I think it's quite different. So here's your 2. There's no clutter in the imagery, as you can see, so again I think it lends itself to a lot of, now instead of blood there seems to be like drips of tears, which I thought was quite cool. So I think there's sort of a lightness about some of this deck, and because there's no one else in this imagery, I think you've got a sense of being a very mental aspect of it, you know, really within yourself in a conflict, in a battle. It's the traditional boat. This looks like you're speeding ahead, you're leaving behind the old. It's quite cool. I mean, yeah, the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith imagery in the 10 of Swords is definitely there, but I still feel, yeah, I think it's so personal. I do like this deck overall. Even, I think this would be the only sort of really huge Rider-Waite-Smith deck that I would really connect with. Now, the other one, I suppose, really, would be the Starman Tarot. Now, this imagery can seem... Oh, I didn't put that in order. Okay. So, these cards actually aren't in order, but you can... It's the Ace. I mean, you can see the colour in this deck. That's the 2. Okay, that's the 9. Okay, before I show the 10, which I think is really cool, let me just, before I do 6, that's the 6. 7, 8. Now the 5, I could say it is paint, not blood, in that respect. Well, that's the 3 of Swords. That I thought was quite different. I thought was quite cool. So the Starman Tarot is another one that sort of takes it in a different aspect overall, I think, with the imagery, the colours, everything sort of... Now, this one I love. Again, you've got those 2 people sort of reaching towards each other, or are they pulling away, or are they being dragged apart? You know, and I think that's quite cool for a 10 of Swords. What are your thoughts? Okay, Princess. Just like your page. You got Prince. Now this is the only one I find a bit gory, is that he's covered in blood, but it really doesn't show too much. Just that he is covered in blood. Oh, cool. Queen. And King. Okay. So in saying that, a few years ago, going through my decks and everything, and I was working, and I had a sort of muck around with some digital art, just for some fun. Now this wasn't for sale, this is not for sale, but you can download it free from my website if you want to print it out and laminate it yourself. Or the quality of the pictures are most probably not that great in regards to like downloading into like playing cards or something like that to print out, but just normal print and laminate. This is the back of the deck. Oops, so you can sort of see. Vestas Art Tarot deck. That's what I was working with. Okay, so what I did was for ear, I did butterflies. So I don't know. Oh, yeah, you can sort of see. And I know with the laminate, it does make it very bright. Might reflect a little bit. So you can see. So basically, you've got 2 butterflies there. You've got 3 there. Then you have 4. Then you have 5. 6. So again, you're open to your own interpretation with numerology and soups and things like that, whatever else information that comes through for you. If you work intuitively, if you don't need the imagery as such. I mean, I've created a few different decks online from my abstract art, which again, you're just using your own interpretation, your own thoughts, your own intuition, your own gut feeling. There's your page. There's your knight. It's giving advice, teaching. Queen. On the phone. And the king. I mean, this is just for myself. This was just all fun. So you can download it for free on my website, whatever you want to do with it. And if you want to print it off or use it with an awfully software. So there you go. That is my current tarot decks that I've got at this time. Might give you some ideas in working with swords. So I find for me when I work with the swords, I'm always looking at perspectives and thoughts and ideas and plans, and how can those perspectives change? How can they evolve? How can they expand, develop? You know, that's how I look at swords. So, yeah, these are some of my favourites. These are the decks I use quite a lot overall at different times. You'll have seen them on Instagram. You might have seen them on a Twitter. And plus you might have seen me do some of my unboxings, some of my reveals, some of my weekend intuitive reads. They'll show you some of the decks as well. So, and again, I've just done the Starman Tarot. Last week I did the Epic Tarot. So if you want, I can link some of those down to it, or you can just go through my channel. There are quite a lot of videos that I have moved through. So, yeah, I've done a lot of the decks as unboxings or that. So anyway, that was my thing about swords being negative. Yeah, the imagery can be very dark and very negative, but I think it's important for us as readers to reflect on that shadow aspect and allow us to find the positive, or to turn it around to make the changes that we need. But there's definitely some artists who have found ways to change some of the imagery, like the Epic Tarot for sure, the Fairy Lights Tarot, of course, Radley's Tarot deck. Of course, you've got the Lisa Parker's Tarot deck. I think that's very interesting in regards to the imagery. Of course, the Tarot de Marseille, and you've got aspects of that. Yeah, you've got the darker decks as well, like the Native American Tarot right away. There's definitely some aspects. Even the Circle of Life, I think, has a real lightness about it. So there are plenty of decks. I'm looking forward to seeing what some of the like the Animal Wisdom Tarot I've got coming, the Mother Peace Tarot, and I know I'm going to love working with that. There's the Crystal Power Tarot deck I'm looking forward to getting at some stage. So there are some other tarot decks that I'm looking forward to exploring when they arrive. So anyway, that's now I've got to go through and put the two parts together because of the things that are going on, the stuff that's happening with my son in surgery with his ankle that was totally smashed. Youch. Painful skateboarding. So anyway, that's me, Hikate's Crossing, with the sword cards in a selection of tarot decks. And of course it's been a lot longer than I sort of anticipated. But that's what happens when we start sharing and talking about tarot. And I thank you to Nat for making me think about this, allowing us to actually explore our swords and the different decks and how they reflect within ourselves, and how we can sort of look at that imagery and reflect and contemplate how does it affect us. So I'm so pleased that some of the artists have changed some of the imagery and really created something quite different and quite unique. So that's me. Take care and blessed be.